Hey there, we are off. Today is February 9th, 2023. This is the Freedom Farming and Living Podcast, Episode 5. Can you feed everyone you know? I'm Robin, I'm your host. Let's dive into this topic. Can you feed everyone you know? Me personally, I know I can't feed everyone I know. I'm not even equipped to feed everyone in my family. So, can you feed everyone you know? Maybe a few people can, but the reality is most people can't. Um, Beyond that, even most people struggle to feed their immediate family at least 100%. So there's something that I've heard, and if you're doing really almost any level, maybe not any level, but if you're doing very much in the homesteading world, you have probably heard this at least once, if not many times. And when I say it, for those that have heard it, you'll know exactly that feeling that comes with it. Um, for me, it's kind of, how do you respond? And that phrase is, I know where I'm coming if things go sideways, or if things go south, or some deviation from that core phrase, but it's given the same meaning. Meaning you have done some wonderful things here. You're growing all kinds of food. You're raising all kinds of animal for food. Maybe you have protection. Maybe you're in a position, maybe you're way out in the country and you're isolated, or certainly more isolated than someone that might be in the city or even in the suburbs. And so your place is a safe place, right? It's a place to go and get away from the troubles that would happen in some type of civil unrest, maybe some major supply chain issues, even greater than what we've already experienced in the last couple of years. Something that would cause people, certainly on at least a micro, but probably more like a macro level, to have a hard time getting food. And so you have all these animals, you have all these gardens, you have all this stuff that you can just feed everyone. And certainly they're not thinking you can just feed everyone, but they're thinking that, they would get included in you feeding yourselves, and you can bring in someone and help provide them food as well. And the reality is, what they may or may not realize, and in some cases people may be joking, because they don't really think that anything could happen. Given the last couple of years, I think more and more people probably aren't in that camp. But certainly there's still plenty of people that are going on with life. There's no issues. There's nothing to be concerned with. It's all going to be here. We came out of this okay. Which is true. We did come out of this fairly well unscathed. I mean, you can look at some prices that went up and really haven't went down, and probably won't go down for at least a significant amount of time, if ever. And I'm not talking about the chicken egg prices here. I'm referring to just things in general. There's certain things that you just go to buy and the price is double, at least 25% more than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And now it's gotten to the point to where it just keeps slowly going up more and more. There may be some pullback, but I wouldn't expect a whole lot. So again, to get back to this, what do you do when someone says, I know where I'm coming, things go sideways? Do you say, sure, come on over? Or do you go, no, I'm not doing all this to take care of you. I'm trying to have enough to take care of me. Or are you somewhere in the middle? Yeah, we'll see. I mean, you kind of shrug it off. I mean, there's so many different ways you can approach this. And my approach has kind of been, in some cases, the person may actually kind of laugh about it. And so they kind of are joking, but at the same time, it does become a little alarming when you hear multiple people say it, and me personally, I start to kind of think and go, I hope all these people don't think that they can all come here. Because while it looks like a lot, and it is a lot, we are raising a good bit of food, and growing a good bit of food as well. But if you're homesteading, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't go as far as you'd think it would go. All those animals look like a whole lot of food, and all those gardens look like a lot of food. But when you add it all up at the end of the year, it's not as much as you think it would be, for various reasons. For one, you may not get the production out of it that you expected. Your animals may not dress out at the weights you were thinking. But the other reality of it is it has nothing to do with the up and down of harvesting or production. Those ebbs and flows of how much you get. It has more to do with the fact that you just can't eat all that you see. If you've got, it's an incredible one. If you look at cabbages and you look at broccoli, and you see these just enormous plants sitting there. There's so much to them. But when you get through pulling all those big leaves out that you're not going to eat, you can't eat, right? And you get down to the actual cauliflower, head of cabbage, or the broccoli that you pull off of there, you're left with this big pile. Just a big pile of stuff which can go to your animals, can go to compost. It has a use, but it's not food for you anyway. And so you have this thing that starts off this big, but when you actually get to what you're going to eat, it's more like this big. In the case of broccoli, it's much smaller than that. So people that don't grow their own food don't realize this. They just go to the store, get that head of cabbage, get that head of cauliflower, bring it home, cook it. And so when they see all this stuff growing, it looks like an enormous amount of food. And to be fair, you do have a good bit of food growing out there, but it's not all food, and at least not all human food. So I think it's important that we educate those people in our lives. I have a real passion for what we're doing on our homestead, that we are growing food that it's not just that we're growing food so we don't have to go to the grocery store. We're growing food that we can't get at our grocery store. We can't get it at a grocery store really anywhere, but we can't get anything remotely close to what it is that we're raising and growing ourselves at a grocery store that would be, let's say, 1.5 to 2 hours away. If we drive that far, then we get close to something that would have some organic offerings, some grass-fed offerings. But as far as what's in our immediate location, no, not even close. Drive 45 minutes to an hour, pick up a few things that aren't available nearby, but really you don't get into real quality, nutrient-dense food unless you drive a few hours or go to another farm. And obviously we want to support as many farmers as we can, so we haven't bought meat from the store. I can't even remember the last time we bought meat from the store. I do on the road, unfortunately, because I can't cook in my hotel room. That's where I'm at now. I'm in St. Louis. So the farm back in Louisiana, my wife, like I talked about in last week's episode, she is handling it like she does when I'm out of town. Just day in and day out, doing everything that needs to be done. And for example, we have one of our goats that's pregnant, and she is probably 2 months out, a little shy of 2 months out from her at least earliest date. We actually put our buck and doe together and leave them together for a month. That way, we don't have to worry about if we missed it or standing out there watching and just spending all this energy waiting to see if they, actually bred. We just put them in together for a month because we don't have that many, and we can guarantee that, well, as long as it is going to take, we can guarantee that these two have actually bred, and then we can pick and choose who's who, and then that way for our customers that are wanting to get an unrelated paired animal, we know that we can offer this production with what they already have. We can mate it up however we need to. We keep pretty good records on who's bought who. If we know that, we get really good records if we know that they're planning on coming back to us for something else. But we do try to keep record of who we sell to, not just that we sold something. We try to keep track of who bought who and what that came from. So that way, if they do come to us and say, hey, we decided we want to go ahead and start breeding as well, that we're not selling them another goat or pig or whatever the case is, rabbit, that's a brother or a sister to what they've already bought. And we love seeing that people are coming and buying more. Rabbits, we've had a lot of people buying breeding pairs, or if we can't offer a breeding pair, they're buying something from us, and we kind of send them in some other directions to maybe find a paired up, or even if they're looking for a trio, we can find two unrelated from somewhere else or one unrelated from somewhere else. And it is really great to see that people are taking hold of that and growing their own food. But for the ones that aren't, and that are saying, I'm coming to your place, and you don't want to be rude about it and say, no, you're not, because this is all a hypothetical anyway. So I would say that, it's something that I need to work on, is conveying to those people on a more direct level that, why don't you start doing some of this yourself? You have room to do it yourself. You might not be able to put a cow in your backyard, but you can certainly put some gardens up. You could throw up a cage with a couple of rabbits in it and have the capability. Doesn't mean that you have to go ahead and start immediately breeding a whole bunch of rabbits and filling up your freezer with rabbits if that's not what you want to do. But if you want to be able to say, well, I'm coming to your place if it goes sideways, well, why don't you just have your place have some of the things there as an insurance policy? And then you don't have to come to my place. You can take 3 rabbits and produce 300 pounds of meat in a year. Give or take, obviously. But, it's one of those things where obviously you want them to just sit there. You'd want to breed them, but it's one of those things where, number one, you'd want to learn the process anyway. So I think it's just important for us to protect, not to say protect what we have, to keep people from it coming. I would love to have the abundance to everyone that I know, that I could feed everyone I know. If I had that abundance to do that, that would be just awesome. Unfortunately, I don't. It's not because I know that many people. It's because it takes a lot of land to grow enough food to feed several people, even a few people for that matter. You can do a lot if you're very intensive and very diligent about what you're doing. But to just say, oh yeah, I can grow for everyone. I can grow for 50 people. I can grow for 20 people. how far down, what's your number that you can grow for? The other thing with that is, if you're doing like we are and we sell our unused things, our excess, we don't eat all the rabbits that we grow out. We don't eat all of our pigs, all of our goats. We're not going to eat all of our sheep. So if we're going to continue as we're going, that means we're going to continue to sell the things that we have in excess. Someone's going to come over and they're going, because things went south and went sideways, and now that excess is going to go to them. The things that we can't provide for ourselves, where are they going to come from? Well, our thought is that we have excess, and right now we sell it for monetary exchange. We get dollars. Now, we do have some instances where we do some bartering. We do trade with some people. But, the assumption would be, if things went south, if this hypothetical were to occur, that excess that we normally are either selling or bartering with would probably go into almost a full-blown barter. But if we have somebody eating our excess, then we have nothing to barter with. And those things that we can't provide ourselves, that a neighbor might be able to provide in exchange for something that we have that they don't produce themselves. Right? That's the whole thing. That's the community barter system. And that's what we really would like to develop where we're at. So can't have everybody come on your property and eat all your food, and then now you can't get those things you need. You certainly can't provide those things to them if you can't even provide them to yourself, and you have nothing to trade for it other than maybe labor, if that's the thing. But again, that person in your community that has those things you don't have, and they're wanting to trade for you for what you have, they don't need the labor. They need the thing that you have. So I think it's really important for us to, again, in those situations where someone's joking, it's all well and good, obviously, and you don't want to destroy relationships or damage relationships, again, over a hypothetical, over something that's, if you think about to the point where if you have someone or a family member or a friend that lives 1,000 miles away, and they see what you're doing on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram or whatever, right? Or they come to visit and they look around and go, this is incredible. I'm coming here if things go sideways. If they're going to travel 1,000 miles to your place, that means things went really sideways. This is not some 3 days and the grocery stores are getting filled back up again because the ice storm has passed or the hurricane is over. This is serious problems. Well, this light's really got me. Apologize if you're watching this on video. I look like a glow in the dark bug or something. Anyway, so if I can adjust this a little. So again, just I would say that it's something we need to work on. I know I need to work on it. You may already be handling it in the best way possible, but if you're not, if you're like me and you haven't known what to say, I'm not going to tell you what to say because I'm not 100% sure what I'm going to say. This is just something I've heard a few times, and it's finally, as we start going through some of the economics of it, where we're scaling up in some areas, and you realize that, I start to see that, okay, well, yeah, we have some excess, but we don't have an abundance of excess, not yet. We hope to continue to develop some of the properties that we have that we're working with so that we can have that abundance. But for them properties to continue to be paid for by us and make sense to have and to spend the work and effort and energy into it, they do have to pay for themselves. Additionally, I travel all around the country. I've mentioned this in previous episodes, and I don't want to keep doing that. So the way out of that world, to retire from that work, and I own this company, and so it's fine. It's funding everything we're doing on the farm, and everything we want to do on the farm. It's an investment into that, and even if it is something that we can't scale it all the way up where we need to, we can at least scale it up to where we produce our own food, let's say 85%, 90% of what we consume. Since I've swapped over to a keto carnivore diet, and I went on the road shortly thereafter. I mean, I wasn't home very long, few days, maybe a week. No, it's only about a week. Boy, it's made it a whole lot easier to just go out to the freezer and say, okay, I've got 100 pounds of ground beef in here. I don't want to eat just ground beef every day for 100 days, but there's ground beef. One cow, well, it's a calf and a cow went in there, but and then looking at the chickens, we've got 25 chickens in here that we can eat on, and again, I'm just eating primarily meat. I would say I'm more keto carnivore, but heavy on the carnivore. Basically, the keto part that I'm doing is just so I can have like a pickle, an apple, just to give me that brightness that comes with eating that. It's more of a I don't know, maybe weaning off of some of those carbohydrates, but it's still extremely low carb. So if you think about it, I mean, I'm not growing apples, but we have berry bushes, we have fruit trees that we are working on. So a little bit of that. And yes, we have our gardens that we're growing a lot of things in. We do our annuals. Perennials is something that we're certainly seeing the value in, to be able to just have some perennials going and go out and snack on them. And again, that would be in relatively small portions. The bulk would come from all the animals we're raising. And so while this freezer full of meat is a lot of meat, when you're eating that much meat, in a carnivore-ish type diet, that meat's going to disappear. It's going to disappear anyway, just eating normal meals, but it's going to disappear much more quickly than it would if you had a plate that was more plant heavy with side of meat. So one of the things, though, that I can look at and say that this is really powerful is to say, okay, we've got an abundance of eggs. Now, like everyone else, we hadn't had an abundance of eggs because we were in winter. And of course, we got hit with the double, actually in our case, like a triple. We had the molt, we had layers that were getting older, and then we hit winter. And so we had just slowdown after slowdown after slowdown. But now we're coming out of it. Some of our younger layers are now into production. And that's one of the things, and I listening to Jack Spirko over at the Survival Podcast last month, he said, go ahead and do your incubating now so that when the molt hits, those chickens that you hatched out now pick up the slack and start laying. So that's something that we're implementing. We implemented it this year. We we just had the first 2 chicks hatch today, and we've got, I think we have 60 eggs in the incubator and maybe a dozen duck eggs in another incubator. So we've got our replacement birds coming because we have when we first got into homesteading 3 years ago, we still have some of those chickens. So they are long overdue to go into the freezer for stock and stew chickens. So we, looking at how many eggs you can eat in a day, if you're carnivore, and I'm not talking about just eating nothing but eggs, but if you can take an egg or two and include it with each meal that you eat with what other meat you're eating, you can really bump up that percentage that you're going to provide for yourself. There's not a whole lot more that you would need if you're on a carnivore. So that's one of the things that I really like about it is the freedom that comes with, if you're eating carnivore and you're growing your own meat and eggs. It's not to say that you don't need anything from anybody else, but boy, you sure don't really have to worry about bartering a whole lot. So I think one of the big things for us is because we have our ruminants, We do need hay at times. So hay is something that would be the thing that we've got to go out and get. Now, that said, part of why, as we've expanded our land, that we're releasing some extra land, the idea is to say, okay, well, let's stockpile forage so that we don't have to buy so much hay. We're trying to regenerate some land so that it can produce enough so that we don't have to buy hay. So yeah, I think that, as you get better systems in place and get better and you scale up, the number of people that you can feed beyond your own family certainly can increase. But to just say it's an open door policy, everybody come on over, is a pretty tough thing. And I think it would be an important deal that if the wheels really did fall off and it did go really sideways, you wouldn't want people driving 1,000 miles or 200 miles or even 50 miles and showing all up on your doorstep and going, I told you I was coming. I'm here. What you got for me to eat? Where am I sleeping? So while, like I said, I know no one wants to go and damage relationships over a hypothetical, but at the other side of that is you don't want to have a bunch of people showing up that you can't take care of. But the conversation can certainly be geared towards, why don't you do some of this for yourself? Even if it's, you're in a suburban neighborhood and you just get you a green stalk and a couple rabbits. You've got fertilizer, you've got meat, quail, for those folks as well. They're quail and rabbits. That's the big so many urban homesteaders, quail and rabbits. And we've had quail and rabbits. We don't have the quail anymore. We stepped out of those. Not to say we won't go back to them, but we're focusing on some of our more larger animals and putting a lot more effort into our rabbits. And the quail and the rabbit were sharing an area, so the quail had to go. Make room for more rabbits so that we can increase and scale up in some of the things we're doing there, as well as diversify some of our offerings that we've been doing. Something I've talked about before, that we had so many people looking for breeding stock, and we could provide some breeding stock, but we couldn't provide a whole lot of unrelated pairs or trios. So now we can, and that's a pretty powerful thing, to know that you have the ability to sell someone an unrelated pair and say, okay, these are unrelated. We have sold some where the person was growing them for meat, so they didn't care they were brother and sister. And they knew that they wanted that. Not to say so much, I guess they wanted that, but they knew that that's all we had available, and they bought it and said it's okay because you're using it for meat anyway. In a situation like that, it's fine. But more people are looking for unrelated. And so now that we can provide that to people, that's great, because now not only can we say, why don't you do some of this for yourself and I'll help you. I'll show you, here's my setup. Here's how I do it how you want, but here's a good starting point for you to look at. And here it's a one-stop shop. You can come here, learn how to do it, take you some rabbits home with you. And you don't have to go searching around, finding a match, find a mate for this buck or for these two does. You don't have to worry about going and searching around trying to find one. So that's a thing for us that we really look at. It helps get the message, and it helps put it and put the ball in someone's court to say, okay, now I have all the resources here available for you to do this yourself. Right? This is the teach a man to fish, that kind of thing. So I'm not going to carry this any forward. I've kind of beat this dead horse, but like I said, I just want to put that out to people that if you're encountering that, I hope that you'll work on it like I plan to work on it, to to just try to move people into doing a little bit more of their own thing so they don't come knocking on your door and you have to turn them away, or you have to put yourself in a somewhat rough position to accommodate them. So best of luck in your endeavors in that department and in all your other homesteading departments. I appreciate you taking the time to support me by listening to this podcast. We're still very early stages, so forgive me for my amateurism in this. I hope to improve as I go along. Again, this is a podcast that will be mostly done from the road. When I'm home, I will try to focus a little bit more on some YouTube videos when it makes sense to do so, some farm tours, projects, things that I'm doing. But because I'm on the road so much, I wanted to take this opportunity to share my thoughts, my plans, the goings on, and that way I can just keep this format of a look into our homestead journey, our farming journey, and maybe you can gain some insight from it. So, best of luck to you. God bless. See you on the next one.